Welcome to Harmony Talk, a podcast about dreamers and doers. Here, people from all walks of life tell us about their dreams, how they fulfilled them, and the moment they knew there was no turning back. This podcast is sponsored by AM Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm your host, Todd Stephens. My guest today is an entrepreneur who built her career marketing some of the best-known sports drinks and alcohol beverages in the world. Through her career, her campaigns have generated over $1 billion in revenue for such well-known brands as Red Bull and Anheuser-Busch. Yet Ella Parlor is so much more than a marketing guru and brand ambassador. Growing up in Southern California, she learned the value of hard work and determination, starting on the ground level of the food and beverage industry. She built a career that shattered glass ceilings as she faced adversity head-on. With her boundless energy, today she's a consultant, mentor, professional coach, and did I mention she's also a storyteller, best-selling author, and a true dreamer and doer. Ella Parlor, welcome to the program.
Ooh, Todd, that was a lot to hear. What deep dive did you go into the ether? That was incredible, amazing. Thank you. But I'm very humbled to have that intro.
It's certainly our pleasure to have you on the program. And with someone whose background is diverse as yours, it's difficult to summarize what you've done in just, a minute intro. So kudos to you.
Well, kudos to you for finding a way to be succinct. I've yet to figure that out myself. That's actually why I wrote the book, because I would get that question a lot. What do you do? What are you? And so I decided to write a whole book, a whole resume. So thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
That's great. Well, yes, you did write a book, High Tolerance. It's a great read, by the way. I have it here, and I'd love to dive into that in a minute. But I did mention your career for more than 15 years was building brands, beverage brands, most recently in the alcohol industry. And what's interesting to me is that your career didn't start on Madison Avenue. You have a longer backstory than that on the ground level. Can you tell us a bit about how it all started for you?
I'm very, very grateful for that, because I think that you want to be on the ground, right? Keep both feet on the ground. But really, when they talk about pounding pavement, when you start any sales job, just knowing where your consumer is at when they purchase, and not just the consumers that we advertise to on TV commercials and billboards, but our retailers, the local independent liquor store owners and the regional grocery chains that I've been able to work with across the country. Being in those stores, I think, has given me such a competitive advantage compared to the Madison Avenue people who spent most of their time in classrooms and in beautiful high rises. And I don't turn up my nose to that. I think that there's a lot of great data science out there, but being able to take a story and give a real world application of what impacts people every day, that's what excites me. And it's hard. As you become an executive, you want to stay with the people and on the ground and at the ground level and the retail level. But unfortunately, it's not always best for a business that it's not always serving everyone. And so I try really hard to prioritize staying in the retail arena, being at the stores, going to the liquor stores, going to the dive bars, whatever it might be. It's really important to me that I don't lose touch of what that end user, as we say, looks like. And so thank you for honoring that, because that is really important to me that, I built it from the ground up, entry level, part-time.
And you actually have, in your earliest parts of your career, you were actually a server, right? And a brand ambassador. You were with the customer.
Yes. I'm really grateful for my time serving. I think everybody, if you have a teenager in your life, get them working in a restaurant. I believe that whatever we do as human beings, whether it's through work or being a stay-at-home mother or volunteering or building a business, building a new product, it always has to have the heart of service behind it and selflessness. If what you're doing and creating is not serving the greater good, the people, then I just think that it's pretty futile and fruitless. And so the fact that my career began serving at a restaurant, it is very important to me, because I think that having service, taking care of someone, feeding someone is a really unique opportunity to see how people operate. And it also humbles you in a way to know, like, it's not all about me. I can step aside and serve somebody else. And while I'm not always perfect at it, I really do try to keep a heart posture of service in everything I do.
Heart posture is a great way to put it. Always thinking about that experience that someone's having. And for your perception of their time with you in that industry, there must have been something that set you apart early on, because it seemed like, looking at your career, you had one opportunity after another. Someone observed something in you. Did you have a perception of people's experience with you as a customer that differentiated you in some way from others out there?
Gosh, you're giving me so much credit here. I appreciate that. I do talk in my book that opportunities came my way. And I would actually say that opportunities are all around us. It's just, are you prepared for that opportunity? So, do I believe in luck the way that we think of it as some magical thing? No. I think luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And what I have learned being in a market like Southern California, where you have a big media presence and celebrity presence. Then you add nowadays the cell phones. Anyone can record you anywhere, right? You got cameras on people's doors and Teslas, and all eyes are on you to some extent. I think growing up in Southern California, I had a very hyper vigilant awareness of that. And there are reasons for that. Every executive wants to come visit Southern California. It's their favorite market to make an excuse to come pop in. And so you would hear stories of various executives popping into stores. And this actually happens, whether you're working at a Lululemon or a smoothie shop like I did or a restaurant. And so I really try to treat everyone, because I've learned that this actually happens in business with nepotism. I try to treat everyone like either they're an undercover CEO, right? Like the undercover boss show, or they're the CEO's like brother, cousin, nephew, niece, wife undercover, because I know that that happens, especially in the beverage industry, which is so niche and small and very family based. You have a lot of, call it what you want, nepotism, family business, whatever dynamic you want to say. You just never know who someone's cousin, brother-in-law is. And so, yeah, I always try to treat everyone with stellar star service, but not because I thought they were actually the executive, because my thought is, well, if you just treat everyone well, then you don't have to worry about covering yourself down the line.
And that's what's helped you. So you had some opportunities where people recognized you and said, we need to talk to her a little bit more. We need to give her another opportunity.
So the restaurant that I worked at was a very popular chain around the United States, and the owner came in. I had no idea who he was. And I was making small talk with him and very comfortable. I wasn't acting any special type of way around him. And he was tickled by the fact that I clearly did not know who he was. At that point, I was a host. So I technically wasn't supposed to be serving, but I always tried to help the servers. And I figure if their job's easier, my job's easier, get people in and out of this restaurant faster, more money. So yeah, I was just helping him and serving his food and helping out the server. And he really liked that. I had another situation in another role where HQ came in, again, undercover, incognito. And I talk about this in my book, but for my own selfish reasons, I was trying to upsell them on the products available at the store. And once again, they were just tickled by my hard sell. They brought me on to join their marketing team. So I went from the store level to working for the brand team. And that's really what kicked off my beverage marketing career.
So working for the brand team, that's amazing. I mean, you've told us so many things there: networking, excellent service delivery, and opportunity, and your preparation for that. And you talk about brand marketing whenever you walk into a grocery store, liquor store, packy, as we used to call them in some places where I used to live. There are so many brands. And when you dive into the ownership behind some of these brands, there are so many products that they have under their umbrella. How did you differentiate? Did you try to find ways to speak to certain audiences in your marketing, or were you just, let's get our logo in front of as many faces as possible? What was your spin on that?
So the beverage industry is interesting because you have the distribution side of it. So you have to sell a product 3 times before it gets to your consumer, right? So the family at the store actually purchasing the product, you've had to sell it 2 times before it even got into their hands. So I think one of my strengths is I don't just focus on who the end user is. I'm looking at, okay, like you talked about the Packies, it's who owns this store and what do they need? Are they worried about having, like, what works for that particular store? And then even a step back is on the distributor side, what does the distributor need? If we have a portfolio that is very heavy on something they already have, then we're just going to be cannibalizing their business, right? By trying to bring in product that they already have. So my strength is in finding the unique sales positioning for a brand and making sure that it actually fits. And just a couple weeks ago, actually, but I'm very comfortable doing this. I will tell someone, no, you don't need this product because it's only going to take up shelf space for products that you already have. My intention in sales and marketing is always to bring incremental business. Now, at that consumer level where you're pulling the product out of the cold box, I want you to evoke certain emotions. I want you to feel a certain way when you're pulling that product off the shelf. So you're choosing my product instead of the one next to it. But before then, it's important about strategic placement, not because of where I can get the most people, but where I'm actually serving the business on every tier. So everybody's making money, everybody's profitable, and nobody's sitting on product that isn't going to move.
So you're looking at it from a number of different angles where a lot of us go to a sporting venue or whatever it is and just say, oh, there's that sign, I'm going to order one of those when I get the next break. That's interesting. And I think the interesting thing about your book too, for people who don't know the inner workings of the alcohol marketing industry, you also give some great tidbits on the legalities, setting up brands, and how complex the industry really is. Not only is it heavily regulated and heavily taxed, which you mentioned, but it's also extremely detail oriented. So that must have been a lot to learn as a young person, especially coming into the industry.
Yeah, I think one of the first times that compliance was a big deal for me. So I've had several infractions in my career, which happens if you're in the industry. It doesn't mean that I myself intentionally broke the law, but it could be something like our brand team in New York created something that wasn't compliant in California, but we didn't know that it wasn't compliant and we just reused it without checking with legal. It's very easy for that to happen if you don't have the acumen, which is why the industry hires from within first, because that type of knowledge. I will say my book is by no way legal advice. Like, I wouldn't give it to an owner in lieu of a lawyer. Like, no, definitely get an attorney. But I try to make it more digestible for anybody who wants to grow within the beverage space, especially like servers, bartenders, bar managers who are struggling to understand why they're having a harder time getting hired by brands. It's because of those legal compliances. So having a better understanding of what the law is outside of their retail arena. Bartenders know bars really well, but they don't know the off-premise, like grocery stores and Packies, as you mentioned, and liquor stores as well. And so you have to have that comprehensive view. But I had a really interesting campaign which they just talked about it recently. So I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this. But The Girls Next Door was a really popular show. And I had no idea. It was a Hugh Hefner bunny show. I had no idea it was their first big campaign. And they did a campaign, but you'll notice that only two of the girls were in it. The third bunny was supposed to be in it, but last minute, our team found out that she could not be a part of it because she was under 25 years old. And being under 25 meant that she would appeal to people under legal drinking age, which is 21 in the US. And I remember just thinking, that doesn't make sense. She's 21. And she was really upset, of course. I mean, anyone would be upset that they can't be a part of this big campaign. But I just heard them on their podcast a few months ago revisiting that campaign and talking about their perspective. They didn't mention the whole legal compliance of how she was cut because she was under 25 at the time and the other two bunnies were. But it was just so interesting because that was the first time I realized, oh, it's not as simple as you have to be 21. Like, there are compliance. And so the companies that I've worked for, I've had to do some serious compliance trainings. I've worked with general counsel very closely, especially when you're creating big campaigns. I have gotten some very uncomfortable phone calls for campaigns I've created just because of using a word like hydrate. You can't use the word hydrate because that insinuates a health benefit to drinking alcohol. That's against the law. I made the mistake of calling a product cognac, even though it was technically a cognac that had been aged in an oak barrel. So it was no longer legally a cognac. And so instead of calling it its proper legal name, I had put cognac in the fine print, got a call from France. It was not good. They were like, we're going to have to stop production immediately on all if Cognac France sees this, we're going to have to start production. You need to take that down. I was like, oh my gosh. It went on a channel that has like 60 million followers. So it was kind of a big deal. And I'm sweating going, how can a tweet that has fine print cognac, but that's the type of pressure. Then you add not just the legal fees of getting an infraction, but like I said, you could have a council come in and make you stop production of your entire business for the day, week, month, whatever they decide. It is very nuanced and it's very important to understand compliance.
Wow. Wow. Now I'm sweating just thinking about that scenario. Seriously. That's amazing because your experience obviously was cumulative. You had to learn all of that along the way. Our podcast is about dreamers and doers. And as I'm hearing you tell about your experience through the alcohol industry, I have to ask, growing up in Southern California, did you ever dream of doing something like this? Was it always your dream to be in the marketing arena, so to speak?
Working in alcohol, no. My parents did not drink when I grew up. I come from a very conservative background, and it wasn't until I turned 21 that family parties ever had any type of alcohol. To this day, my grandmother is just anti-alcohol altogether. Very conservative Catholic family. So no, that wasn't even on my radar at all. But I will say that I would always bug my mom because I would watch commercials and I would critique them, not like I would say, oh, they should have done this instead, or they should have said this line. Like I was always trying to change commercials to be more effective and impactful. And then in high school, it's a little hard to explain. We had this, we'll say, play, and someone nominated me to be the promoter of the play. And I was like, me? Why? This is not my space. I thought it was very strange, but I was honored at the nomination. And then I was creating these interesting internal campaigns for the play at the school, and we ended up winning like this award. It's really interesting to look back on that now because it seems so obvious. Like, well, yeah, of course I would be the one promoting the play. But at that time in my life, I was on the road to be a doctor. I was focused on math and science and pre-med, and I didn't even know what the word marketing was until after I got my first marketing job. So really understanding what is marketing, what is business. I thought business just meant you owned a store in a strip mall or you went to work at the New York Stock Exchange. I didn't have a concept of what business or marketing was going into college because I had my eyes set on being a doctor. So on that note of the dreaming, I don't know if you've ever had someone say this. So I will say I don't like dreaming. I've suffered from nightmares my whole life. And my mother was born in Mexico. And when I was a child, she gave me these Guatemalan worry dolls. They're really beautiful. They're these small little dolls made out of paper and sand. And you tell your worries to them and you put them under your pillow so you don't get nightmares. And they didn't work, but at least they gave me peace. I believed it. So then at least I could go to sleep and then I would still have nightmares. And then she bought me dream catchers, which again brought me a lot of peace for when I would go to sleep, but I would still have nightmares. I still suffer from nightmares to this day. And they're not gory horror film nightmares. They're ultra humiliating, how could this happen to me type of nightmares. So when I look at the concept of dreaming, it's not the most positive experience for me because I feel like I'm constantly thinking of the worst case scenario. But where that serves me is that in my daily life, from a compliance standpoint, from a risk management standpoint, I'm always thinking about the worst case scenario. So I reverse engineer it okay, if this goes really bad, guys, that was always me, right? In high school and people are experimenting with things, I'm like, okay, but if this goes really bad, we got to be able to work it back and always consider what the worst case scenario is. And I think that's where I have been able to make successful campaigns, successful businesses, successful brands is in a weird way. I try to focus more on the doing than the dreaming side. I would say my dreaming is more filled with risk and fear and then trying to make calculated risks as a consequence.
That's actually fascinating and I can relate. So I have so many questions about that. You talk about, dreams kind of taking you to a dark place sometimes as a child, but you have so much positivity. So, I know when people seem to have those dark dreams, it really kind of weighs on their daily life, but you seem to have a real genuine, authentic positivity to you in all that you do, that I've seen anyway. How do you continue that positive self-thought and self-talk without letting those darker thoughts and feelings creep in?
Drugs. Prescription drugs, Todd. Um, I'm half kidding. So here's a tip for anyone who's going through something really, really, really difficult. And I learned this is if you're going through something really painful, change the furniture in your bedroom. Because when you're going through something really painful and you wake up thinking, oh, it was just a nightmare, and then you realize it wasn't a nightmare, that dread is pretty terrible because you're like, oh, it's not a dream. Like that actually happened. And so by rearranging your furniture, it's kind of that immediate reminder, oh, no, no, no. We rearranged my furniture because this traumatic loss or whatever it is has happened. So when I go through anything like ultra traumatic that feels like a nightmare, I rearrange my furniture because for me, I have so many nightmares that I'm like, that must have been a nightmare, right? On the flip side, however, waking up from really painful nightmares, one thing I've learned to do in my personal life is if someone in my dream wronged me, so I deal with a lot of deception, betrayal, humiliation in my dreams. Like I said, they're not horror gory. It's someone telling a really big lie about me. It's someone trying to out me or blame me for something really big that I didn't do, like a war or something. It's your fault, right? Like I had a dream where one of my best friends pants me in the middle of a business seminar. The funny thing is, I feel like if that happened in real life, I wouldn't even care. Like, I really feel like if that happened, I'd be like, what the heck's your problem? Like, I feel like I would have just laughed it off in real life. But in my dream, it's just utter humiliation. And so for me, waking up, I'm just grateful. Like, okay, if I don't get pants today, it's going to be a good day, guys. Like, this is where the bar has been set. If my fiance doesn't like cheat on me with 3 Playboy bunnies, woo! I'm winning. I'm winning at life. Like, I wake up with such gratitude that it was just a dream.
Wow. So that's where the positivity comes from, knowing that it's just a dream.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And a great advice to rearrange the furniture. And again, to kind of stay on this for a moment too, working in the alcohol industry, I mean, with the American culture, we have such a kind of a love-hate relationship with alcohol, right? We use it to celebrate. We use it as a sign of victory. On the other side, there is a real dark side to alcohol in the United States, alcoholism, crime, those sorts of things. Did you ever have a difficult time reconciling that while working in the industry?
I actually talk about this in my book. There's a chapter called The Darker Side of Alcohol. I talk about my firsthand experience with being in love with an alcoholic and kind of navigating that for the first time because it was very uncharted waters for myself, for me. And I'm going to work and I'm celebrating, woohoo, this campaign's really successful. And I built this new gin brand and we just did this really cool billboard. And then I'm coming home and facing like a boyfriend who's passed out because he drank all night and he's still passed out at 1 p.m., the next day. And that duality was very strange for me, like going to work and celebrating wins and then coming home and facing this. And I started contemplating that a bit. I think for me, I'm such a believer in freedom of choice. I believe in free will. I believe that the difference between poison and medicine is dosage. So I believe in moderation. I believe that we have to decide for ourselves what does and doesn't work for us. And that could be anything from religion, prayer, confession, whatever it might be, water, food intake, caloric intake, exercise, alcohol, as long as it's not illegal, I would say like we want to stay within the parameters of the law. But outside of that, I do believe in freedom of choice. I think what's really unfortunate for us in the industry is that because, and I think there's a bit of a change, and that's what I'm really grateful for my book, is that it is opening up the conversation, is that, for example, like we as Americans go to a bar, hypothetically, we go to a bar to drink and vent to a bartender, right? But a bartender can't really do that because when they go to a bar, that's their place of work. That's not their place of reprieve. That's not their place of relief. That's like, okay, like that's not their outlet. And so a lot of us in the industry don't always get the space to talk about what health, balance, safety means for us, because we're kind of told to, in one way or another, to shy away from these things. There was a company, I was very, very proud of them. It was not a successful campaign. And we're not ready as Americans to face this duality that we're talking about here. But my numbers are different. There's an organization called RAIN, and they are a sexual violence group, support group, right? And I worked for a vodka company that did a cross promotion with them where we wanted to really focus on the importance of consent. We do know statistically that anywhere between 60, quite frankly, my numbers say that the number's closer to 90% of sexual assault occurs under the influence of alcohol for either the assailant or the victim, right? And alcohol companies, we don't want to talk about rape. That's like super uncomfortable. That's a real buzzkill, right? But we know that 3 in 4 women are assaulted in their lifetime. We're trying to compartmentalize it, but there's a lot of integration here. And this vodka company, like, I applaud that they did this camp. I loved it. I was so proud to be a part of it. I literally cried when this partnership was announced. I was so happy. Proceeds for the vodka that sold during that month that we were working with Rain went to Rain to prevent, to, have sexual assault education, all of that. But it was not a successful campaign. Bars didn't want rape posters in their bar because, again, it's a buzzkill. So I don't think that it's just an alcohol industry issue. I think we as individuals have this dissonance where we want to compartmentalize our lives so much and we want to pretend that the painful things that have happened to us, health issues, loss, suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, all these things that we have got going on, we fake it and have a polished image on our social medias. We're always trying so hard to compartmentalize and pretend. I hope that we all get to a point, whether we're working in the industry, whether we're drinking alcohol or not, that we're fully ourselves in every space and that we can honor our experiences in any space we're in, that we don't have to hide the traumas, issues that we have in our lives. But I don't know that it's just an alcohol industry thing. I think if we look at the media, we could have the same exact conversation. If we look at food, how many of us hide our feelings by eating food? How many of us hide our feelings by using recreational drugs? I think pornography, you start getting into it. There are a lot of ways, shopping, retail, where we find escapisms as humans. I just happen to work in one of the more scrutinized ones.
Well, that's so important to hear. I think one of your messages in your book relate directly back to that, which was we should all take a look at our own relationship with alcohol.
Yeah. I listened to your podcast with Mitch.
Mitch motivates. That's right. Yeah.
And I had so many qualms with it. And not from an obvious standpoint. He's a beautiful man. I love his story. I love his testimony. I think it's amazing. He was really, really great. And I loved his bamboo, like that bamboo alliteration that he gave. I'm going to totally steal that. And I might not credit him, but I'm crediting him here and now. Very compelling speaker, really amazing. But his story, it was so linear in the sense of like, I'm very much like, okay, but what about the rest of us that don't fall within that space, right? We don't fall into the, I stole, I was doing drugs, and we're not sober. That's why I wrote my book, because I feel like in the conversation, when we talk about alcoholism addiction, it really does become pointing the finger, and it's like this group of individuals who got 100% sober, which is great and amazing, and I'm happy, and I'm all about freedom of choice. So I love people choosing the life that's best for them and best for society. But then it's like you're either an addict or you're sober, and that dichotomy, unfortunately, leaves a lot of people in the middle who they don't want to call themselves an addict and they don't want to be sober. And so they're kind of lost in the middle, and there's not a lot of dialogue happening for that big, big middle. And I think that that's why I wrote my book. I wanted to write a book that talks about alcohol consumption, not from a space of sobriety. I am not sober, not from a space of you're an addict, you need to get sober, but hey, can we all just I'm not here to judge. I've helped a lot of alcohol companies make a lot of money and sell a lot of booze. So I cannot point my finger at anybody and say, hey, you have a problem. But I am willing to raise my hand and ask, hey, do we have a problem? And is there another way we can talk about it without it turning into the dichotomy of you're an addict, you need to get sober?
Valuable discussion, for sure. We do understand there are people in this world affected by, this disease, alcoholism, who can't drink. And, folks who need to find help. There are places, and we did discuss that with Mitch, and that's absolutely on the money. Some people can't drink. Some people shouldn't drink also. And then, like you said, there's the rest of us. And it's a very worthwhile conversation to have. And I'm glad you're bringing it up in your book. Can I go into a speed mode with you and ask you some questions that might help other people who are building a career?
Oh my gosh, let's go. I told you I'm not good at being succinct. Let's do
Okay,
it.
no problem. Let's do it. How do you manage stress?
Prayer.
Awesome. What would you tell your younger self about building a career?
Be kind, work hard.
What advice would you give another younger person who's just coming up right now, in addition to be kind and work hard?
Stop expecting it to be easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
I love that. And do you have any regrets over the last 15 years in alcohol marketing?
I don't believe in regrets, but there is one thing that I question. I don't believe in regrets. I believe that we are where we need to be, and I really work hard to make the best decision for what I know at the time. I really, again, worst case scenario, right? So I'm always trying to make calculated risks. One calculated risk I made in my career was I relocated to Alabama. And that's a long story. And a lot of people were disappointed that I didn't put that in my book. It's because I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I'm not the same person after leaving that state. I grew up in Southern California in a very diverse, multicultural, arena. And I moved to Alabama in 2014, and it was sort of like being in some ways transported into Jim Crow 1960 days. I got a taste of hatred and racism that I'd just never experienced before and I'd only heard about. And what I really hate about that time, and I don't use the word hate lightly, is that it changed who I am. It really changed me in many, many ways. So I wasn't ready to talk about that in my book. Now, where does the alcohol piece come into that? Well, I moved there for my career. It was a great opportunity. I got a big promotion, but I was working with the good old boys in Alabama, and I'm managing a team who are twice my age. I wish someone had protected me a little bit more in that situation from a work perspective. I wish I had more advocacy from my HR, but I also wish that I had raised my hand and flagged things more. But it was by far the worst year of my life. I was on a year contract and I stayed exactly 13 months and got my ass back to California. It was really, really hard. And I don't know if it made me a better person, to be honest.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that's not easy. And I did read your book, and I do know that that wasn't in there. So we appreciate that. It takes a lot of courage. You bring up some really personal things in your book, including, some health issues you've had and why you took a break from alcohol marketing. That experience seems grueling. How are you doing now?
Oh my gosh. I cannot believe how amazing and perfect my life is. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. My life is just about perfect right now. And I'm afraid to say that because we know that nothing gold can stay. But I am madly in love with a man that I met last year. He asked me to marry him. I'm in the process of moving in with him right now. And I can't wait to marry him and spend the rest of my life with him. He's such a good person. My career, my business is going really well. My book was a bestseller. Things are going really well from a health perspective. It's been almost 2 years since my surgeries, my most recent surgeries. And that first year of recovery was rough. I don't know what it's like to be a recovering alcoholic, but the recovery I went through, I think, parallels a similar journey where you're alone, you go through tremendous pain, physical pain. And then this last year, I'm just trying to get my body back. Like, I put on so much weight between being sedentary. And so just trying to give myself grace. So if I could change one thing, but I have been losing the weight slowly but surely in a healthy way, just trying to give myself grace. I'm excited to do a 5K in a couple weeks and just getting back to super, super healthy. I'm on the up and up. In January, I had, for the first time in my life, 100% perfect blood exam. I've never had that in my life. So my treatments have been working. No abnormalities, no deficits. Never in my life have I ever had that. So what we're doing and my new treatments have been working, and my medication. And so I just got to stay up with it. And, my hematologist oncologist made some promises, and I was like, yeah, right. I rolled my eyes and told him to get bent. But I got to send him an apology letter because his promises seem to be coming true. So I'm really, really grateful. I'm grateful for modern medicine. And I could cry because it doesn't feel fair that I get to be this happy. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, congratulations on a number of fronts there, not only on your upcoming wedding, certainly on your engagement, but also on your health. That's great to hear. And I have to ask then, Ella Parlor, so where do you go from here? What's your next step? Career-wise, what are your upcoming plans?
So I'm someone, just to be fair, especially in the context of my book, right? When I'm working on something, I don't talk about it. I'll talk about it after I have proven success or like some type of proof of success because it's easier for me. But I do want to be vulnerable in this season because I'm doing something really new, which is working in the private equity investor space. So what I'm doing now, especially because of my book, but even a little bit before my book, is because of the experiences I've had working with these really big, big, big brands. What I'm doing now is working with smaller brand owners and helping them position to sell and scale their brands and then sell their brands. And then working with various angel investors, private equity firms, a little bit of venture capital to properly vet the right investment for their portfolio. And so kind of acting as a liaison in exchange for either salary, operational costs, or equity. But it's a different ball game. It's a different kind of sell. So I talked about how in alcohol we sell, on multiple tiers. This is like selling a fourth tier, which is to the investors. So that has been an interesting space. It's just different working for brand owners instead of really, really big conglomerates. But I love it. And as Miss Risk Management worst case scenario, I think I work with a lot of visionaries and dreamers. So I get to be the rain on their parade that goes, yeah, pull that back. We're not doing that. That's a little too crazy. It's a little too crazy. You don't have the money for that. I could tell you don't have the money for that. Let's scale it back. Cut that campaign about Santa Claus. That is not compliant. You're going to get a call from the TTB and you're going to have a big old $100,000 fine. I get to be the bad guy, but in a good way. And so I'm really, really loving it. Like, it's nice. It's a different kind of pressure. I don't answer to a bunch of different people and different, I just get to work with hardworking individuals, but it's a different pressure because it's their livelihood and their dream, right? I've never worked with people's dreams before. So that's interesting for me, but I'm a bit of a dream killer, Todd.
Now that I would say, or I'd say it differently, what you're talking about, the negative dreams that you've experienced has really become a superpower to you, right? Because now you're helping people by thinking of the what could be, and we all need a little bit of tethering sometimes, and you're that tether in those situations. So kudos to you.
Thank you. No, life is really good. It's good. So thank you for asking. But like I said, I hesitate to admit that. It feels like the sky will fall down if you admit that you're happy.
No, it's okay to admit that you're happy. And, I wish we had so much more time because I've got a million more questions for you, Ella. But I really want to thank you for being here today, being so open and sharing everything you did with us. So thanks. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
Oh, it's been so, so lovely to speak with you. You have such a great voice. I really enjoyed HarmonyTALK. Like, what you guys are creating here is awesome. And I really thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. And where can people find you?
I'm very easily found on ellaparlor.com. Wherever you are, I try to be there too. So whatever your channel that you like, if you just look up Ella Parlor, whatever it is, Instagram, YouTube. I'm not big on TikTok quite yet. That's not really my forte. But the rest of them, I'm pretty active. But if you just go to ellaparlor.com, I have all the things.
Well, that's great. We'll make sure that we share that with the audience. I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure. And, hope you come back again after your next huge success.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so, so, so much.
We've been talking with Ella Parlor, entrepreneur, author, and marketing guru behind some of the most popular alcohol brands, perhaps one of your favorites. Don't forget to check out ellaparlor.com and read her book, High Tolerance. I assure you, it's informative, enlightening, entertaining, and certainly heartfelt. This is HarmonyTALK podcast presented by AM Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm Todd Stephens. For everyone out there, keep dreaming and doing.